it does appear in relation to this Wentworth by-election that some people just can't read numbers. And this includes, of course, many who are paid to comment on the result. The fact is that in the seat of Wentworth, there were 103,810 people enrolled. And on a primary vote, that is the first choice that people have, who are you going to vote for? A primary vote. Well, Kerryn Phelps got 21,322. Now, you might remember in the seat of Longman, in the Queensland by-election, all hell broke loose there because the Liberal Party were criticised, disgraceful, disastrous performance because the Liberal candidate didn't get 30% of the vote. Disgraceful, which it was. Disastrous performance. Here we've got the quote-unquote winner of the by-election not on even 30% of the vote. But because she said something's got to be done about Nauru and Manus Island and something's got to be done about climate change, oh, well, Scott Morrison, come on, get yourself into gear, they're saying. You've got to really get stuck into this whole climate change thing. We've got to go back there. This is the issue. After all, didn't they vote in Wentworth? What the hell is going on? So now we're told the Prime Minister must inject $1 billion into the emissions reduction fund. Into the emissions reduction fund. Because Kerryn Phelps has won the seat of Wentworth and she got 29.3% of the vote. Sorry, 29.1% of the vote. 29.1% of the vote. In other words, were people on Saturday set the alarm, get up early, make sure I don't miss it, I've got to race to the polling station, I've got to vote for Kerryn Phelps, I've got to vote for climate change. I must. Really? 29%. Not even 3 out of every 10. And so the lunatics running the asylum say, well, $1 billion into the emissions reduction fund we must have. And then the Energy Minister, Angus Taylor, is going to outline some complicated formula aimed at saving households hundreds of dollars on their power bills. Well, there's one way to do all of that, and that is simply to say, stop demonising coal-fired power. But you've got this Kerry Schott, who's the federal government's top energy advisor, saying the falling cost of renewable power means the federal government will have to close remaining coal-fired power stations earlier than planned. She said commercial reasons will be made about retiring coal plants, and they're likely to get dropped out the front door faster than their technical lives would suggest. Really? Holy Nelly. And these are the people advising government. When all you have to have in energy, electricity, it's got to be available first. It's got to be reliable second, and it's got to be affordable third. Beyond belief, is it not? So, but the Financial Review says, and they're only reporting what is, moderates in the Liberal Party, moderately stupid, quote, concerned at the coalition's lack of climate change policy, are set to demand the Prime Minister revitalise the direct action policy with $1 billion injected into the emissions reduction fund. And the moderates are planning to set up their push for the government to do something concrete towards Australia meeting its Paris Agreement, 2030. Well, if the Liberal Party go mad, then they deserve the fate that's coming their way. Kerryn Phelps was on Q&A last night. She reiterated her primary focus would be dealing with asylum seekers on Nauru and on global warming. And as I've said, Kerryn, that's fine. That's fine, but if you want to get them off Nauru and Manus Island, I'm sure there are lots of spare beds in Vaucluse and Dover Heights and Elizabeth Bay and Wallara. Why don't we sort of stick them in there? She wants 100% renewable energy. Well, come on, Kerryn. Whack a few wind turbines up on Bondi Beach. Or Dover Heights. Plenty of wind there. If not, why not? I posted an editorial on the Alan Jones Facebook page saying more about these dreamt-up policies. Listener comments were extraordinary. Quote, Alan, too many just like her in Canberra already. Morrison is a slight improvement. He needs to bite the bullet and make the hard decisions we're all crying out for. He needs to cut ties with Turncoat. Another, well, they won't be eating in the dark, Alan. They won't be eating at all. Once we stop our coal production and the export income it brings us, we'll all be too broke to afford food. Another, so Kerryn Phelps stands for 100% renewables. Kerryn, you're a supposedly high-profile medical practitioner, and yet you've turned your back on the latest findings of the World Health Organization saying that wind turbines cause health problems. Shameful. Another, does she use candles for lighting, wood or dung fire for cooking, creek water for washing, and does she walk everywhere she goes? No, I thought not. Uses all the modern conveniences, but is against what produces them. Professor Judith Sloan. I mean, is she a snob or out of touch, brainless? Or do you think she might just be a relevant and considered commentator? She writes in the Australian newspaper today, and to give some little synopsis of what she says, and I'll quote, there are a small number of other electorates that are similar to Wentworth in Sydney and Melbourne, but most Australians can only dream of the privileged existences of Wentworth residents. The concerns of these Australians are much more prosaic. How to pay the mortgage or rent, how to cover the weekly bills, can I get to work on time, who's going to pick up the kids, how are the ageing parents getting on, and so on. They haven't really given climate change a second thought, or wondered whether Australia's embassy in Israel should move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. They don't have time to watch the ABC, and they listen to commercial radio in the car while stuck in traffic. They'd like to see their footy team win the flag next year. A time will come, writes Judith, and it's arguably not too far off, when the Liberal Party has to accept that inner city seats that it has traditionally held may be lost forever. Either high-profile independents or Greens candidates will over time snare them. Think Wentworth, North Sydney, Kooyong, Higgins. And there'll be little hope of a Liberal Party candidate succeeding in the foreseeable future. On this basis, the way forward for the Morrison government is to run with policies that benefit and appeal to Australians who live in the outer suburbs and in regional areas, a bread and butter style of politics focusing on national issues rather than global ones. And as Judith writes, skipping pretentious mumbo-jumbo about climate change, identity politics and the benefits of multiculturalism, the Morrison government would be wise to concentrate on the everyday concerns of average Australians. Most Australians are just trying to stay afloat and do the best they can for their families and their communities. Absolutely right. And most Australians didn't want, if that's a microcosm Wentworth, didn't want what Kerryn Phelps was talking about. 7 out of 10 voted for someone else, including, I might add, the Animal Justice Party and the Science Party and the Arts Party and the Christian Democratic Party and so on. It's just rubbish. I'm not sure. Rodney, hello?
Alan.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good.
I fully agree with your view on nuclear energy. Makes so much sense. I mean, cost per megawatt hour, Robert Barr and the Australian Nuclear Association calculated $78. A full renewable system is $400.
That's correct, mate.
Four
right.
times more expensive. And China has got a 2,300% increase in nuclear.
Absolutely. Well, look, Rodney, if you cave into ideology, you go under, don't you? We just caved into stupid, brain-dead, mindless ideology. Drives you nuts. Well done, nuclear power. 30 countries in the world have 450 nuclear reactors, 60 currently under construction. We have 40% of the world's uranium. They're illegal in our country. And some of you have been writing to me, criticising me for not climbing into Scott Morrison over Malcolm Turnbull being asked to represent Australia at an international oceans conference in Bali starting next Monday. Look, the criticism, I think, is valid. I was most probably talking about other things, though until I raised it, I have to say, no one even knew anything about it. This was a personal invitation from Scott Morrison. But I've got to say a couple of things here. The invitation was extended about 8 weeks ago, prior to Turnbull's disgraceful behaviour in the Wentworth by-election. The argument being that Malcolm Turnbull had good relationships with Widodo. This is a conference in Bali on oceans and climate change. Now, if he had good relationships, Turnbull, so did Tony Abbott. Now, Scott Morrison's in a dilemma. The public are unhappy. What are your views about this? Of course, this brings us again to the character of Mr Turnbull. I'll come to that in a moment. But this is an international oceans conference. It's about climate change. On climate change, Mr Turnbull is on the wrong side of the fence. He crossed the floor to vote with Kevin Rudd. On climate change, crossed the floor. He lost 2 leaderships of the party on the basis of climate change. The thing that's alienated people in the Liberal Party is that he signed up to the Paris Agreement on energy policy. He signed up to Paris on migration policy. But Turnbull has said, of course, once you leave the Parliament, you leave the Parliament. Well, if that's the case, how on earth could a person not in the Parliament be representing Australia at an international conference in Bali? And as well, someone who's behaved as treacherously as Turnbull has behaved to represent the party that he has betrayed. Now, people are calling on Scott Morrison to withdraw the invitation. That may be too late. But this comes to the question of character, which I addressed last night on television. If Mr Turnbull had a shred of decency or loyalty to the Liberal Party, both of those, of course, are in question, he would submit to Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, that it would not be appropriate to attend in this climate. And Mr Morrison could appoint Matthias Cormann, Maurice Payne, Tony Abbott, Craig Kelly, anyone but Mr Turnbull. But now, Mr Turnbull will be delighting in the fact that this is inflicting more damage on Prime Minister Morrison. And that is Mr Turnbull's post-prime ministerial agenda. What do you think? An awful piece of work. An awful piece of work.